I'm your host, Felipe Rose, and welcome to the Disco Chronicles and Beyond. This podcast is about the disco era, the music, the culture, and the impact it's had on the world today, and why disco is still so hot. After successfully touring the world for over 4 decades as one of the original co-founders and members of the world-famous Village People, selling over 100 million records, this disco king truly knows a thing or two about the disco era. So sit back and relax and enjoy my conversation with my guest today. On my show today, Robbie Leslie, who is famous for just, not only just a million things, but the fact that he is still there, he's still on the beat, he's on XM radio, he has performed and mixed and DJed at some of the most famous clubs in New York City, Studio 54, the Pavilion, on Fire Island, the Sandpiper, Flamingo, 12 West. Robbie, how are you, my friend?
I'm fantastic. I'm still kind of marveling at the technology that allows us to talk, and I'm up in a cabin up in Maine, which is where I come every summer, just to decompress and to just have like high quality Robbie time, and I'm able to chat with you like.
I know, that's crazy, isn't it?
It still blows my mind a little bit. Yes.
When was the first time that you became interested in DJing? That's the part of you that I don't know. I met you, I think maybe could have been pre-dawn Village People, but definitely during the Village People heyday. So right. When did you actually begin DJing?
I started at the Sandpiper, which you mentioned a minute ago, and I think that may have been when I met you. That was the place to go on Fire Island in the Pines. Every night except Saturday. On Saturday nights, Roy Thode held court at the Ice Palace. So I worked at the Sandpiper, and what a place to start a job. I mean, you know, it was a gift from heaven, truly.
How old were you?
Let's see, I started there when I was 19, so I think I was like 21.
Yeah.
Because I started as a waiter, and then it wasn't until like 2 years later that I sort of asked if I could sort of just dabble in it, you know, because
right.
I love disco music, always did. In fact, I used to stock the jukeboxes at 2 clubs up here in Maine. One was in Portland. It was the first gay bar I ever went to, and it was one of those bars from the past that, like, if the police were going to raid the place, they had a light over the dance floor, which was hidden in the back, and they would flash the light, and everyone would scatter like cockroaches.
Like roaches?
Yeah, like, you know, when you turn the light on in New York City and the cockroaches scatter.
Who were some of your favorite disco artists to spin, and why?
Okay, boy. I've always had a very strong influence from Black, kind of soulful. When I say soulful, I mean gospel-y soulful artists that really kind of had that. It wasn't that fluffy disco so much as it was like, let's just say, like the 2 Tons of Fun, like when Roberta Kelly did her gospel album. He was, I Got It by Gloria Spencer. Some of these like crossover gospel soul artists that just really just did it for me. And I just like that type of energy, that kind of very Black, very soulful, but at the same time, high energy, all mixed up together. So that was my personal, that's what gave me goose flesh, you know.
Yeah, did you play a lot of Sylvester?
I did play a lot of Sylvester, and I preferred old Sylvester to, like, you know, once he started getting a little electronic, like Don't Stop, that album that came out in like
Don't
early
Stop,
80s.
You're Moving Me. Right,
exactly.
Right.
And that's a great song, and it was a huge hit for me, but it didn't resonate for me inside. It didn't have that soulful connection that his earlier stuff like Dance Disco Heat and Mighty Real did.
Well, you were one of the DJs among a few of there's a pocket full of DJs of you guys. Well, it was a handful that
Mhm.
you knew that everyone knew that when you were playing, you were not playing fluff disco from the radio.
Right,
That
that's
I
true.
knew that if I went to 54 or went to the Palladium or went to not the Palladium but Flamingo, I
Mhm.
knew I was going to hear some really good disco music that I had either not heard of or was listening to for the first time. So
Right.
the type of music that you were listening to was not stuff that you would hear on the radio. And I think that's what really why a lot of people gravitated to the dance floor every time you were spinning.
Well, thank you. Just to fine tune this, I did work at Flamingo a little bit, but I worked more at 12 West. That was in fact my first residency in New York City. And that's a nice thing for you to say. I appreciate it. I do know that, these clubs that I worked at in the city when I moved in from Florida, when I moved to New York from Florida, they were like the best of the best, and you just couldn't play like radio, like top 10 radio stuff. I mean, yes,
They'd
there were
walk out.
they
They
would
would walk out.
and they'd read you to filth. They truly would.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And for everyone listening, 12 West was also one of the private clubs that you would buy a membership, and they were more
right.
free with you bringing in, girls or whatever. Because if I'm not mistaken, I did bring a couple
Oh
of
yeah,
girlfriends into dance. But Flamingo was very exclusive. It was an
Flamingo is a
exclusive
lot.
membership.
Yeah, it
You
was a
know,
lot more strict. Yeah,
uh,
about
uh,
who you could and couldn't bring, and that carried over to the Saint, because the Saint was kind of famous or notorious, depending on your point of view, for being very male centric and having a very limited number of female members that they
where
would allow
where
in
Studio 54 was for everyone.
for everyone. Absolutely. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that once again, when we're speaking of clubs, we're speaking of like Studio 54 is like the Xenon, the Phoenix of them all, and then everything trickled down, and you had Xenon and you had New York, New York. You always had a place to go, and every night
Mhm.
was different. From your point of view, what made a club successful?
Well, of course, people wanted to go there. The fact that word got out that it was desirable, and of course that's why the whole rope thing at Studio uh, kind of crystallized that whole concept. That fact that we want to get in, but we can't. So you're creating that dynamic tension.
Yeah.
Uh, and of course, private clubs, then you had to get a membership. But it was really a combination of you had to have good disc jockeys, and that's why if you got a good reputation in New York, you were always in demand. And if you left one club, some other place would just scoop you right up. It was a combination of the music, the location. Of course, the light show was important, but not as important, I don't think. But it had to all be kind of a nice blend. Everything.
Yeah.
And it had to have the right crowd. I mean, if you went in and you didn't have a good time because the right people weren't there, and when I say the right people, I don't mean, the celebrities or anything like that. I just mean your type of vibe, your type of crowd that you're relating to and having fun with. If it doesn't click after the first two visits or so, you probably will move on, won't go there anymore.
Yeah, well, for me, after being on the road with the group, on those Saturdays that I had off and I was home, I would go to the clubs and to hear you guys perform, hear you perform and play. But I went in as a regular guy, nothing having to do with my work. Because I wanted to dance. I just wanted to
Right.
just forget. And sometimes I went alone, sometimes I went with a few friends. But a lot of times I always ended up dancing either with them or with other people or by myself. So
Sure.
we recently spoke to Marsha Stern.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, she's a colleague of yours and a dear, dear
Yes.
friend of mine. My
Bestie
first
forever.
roommate in New York. How
Mhm.
important was lighting to a DJ show set list?
Well, it's not so much what the light show was equipped with, but what the operator could do with it. And I mean, you could have somebody that had tons of effects at his disposal, but if he wasn't doing it right, and in fact, when I first started in the business, when I said the Sandpiper, back then we had to do our own lights too. The DJ would mix the records.
You
And
did? You didn't have to step on a foot pedal, right?
No foot pedal, just like they were actually like switches, like wall switches that
No,
you'd see.
no bus stop, right? Like Maryland
Yeah,
Monroe.
right, right. And I can remember on important mixes where you needed a little dramatic effect.
Yeah.
I would have the headphone on. I'd have one hand on the mixer, and the other hand would be on the light switch. So it was a very complex dance. But I digress. Going back to the lighting operators, it's really important that they were synchronized with what you were doing and they were in the same headspace. Richard Tucker, who's like my all-time favorite, and he's still around.
He's still around. I'm trying to get hold of him.
He is, was, and always will be, like, in my mind, the most like amazing light operator. And I say that with respect to all the people I've worked with, because I've been blessed to have worked with amazing people, from all the different clubs.
Yeah.
But he and I just had this synchronicity.
And well, Marsha talked about that. Marsha talked about that if you were on cue and you were really paying attention to either what the DJs were playing, you could catch some pulsing horn section or strings or something. And if you were lucky enough to catch it and sync yourself with the DJ playing, it became a dance. The lights with the music.
Truly did. And they had to know the music just as well as the DJs did. I mean, they had to know where the snares were and where the, let's say, certain, solo instruments so they could accent them. And, drum breaks, percussion breaks. They had to know everything and anticipate it just as well as the DJ did. And they had to know exactly what the DJ's style was because, for example, they had to know what the flow was because they can't like shoot their wad, at a certain time.
And that means, ladies and gentlemen, shoot the wad, meaning come out blasting and then 4 or 5 hours later have nothing to keep you going.
You got the confetti cannons, you got, every effect on. And then like 2 songs later or a half hour later, when the DJ's peaking the room, you've already peaked the room, like, visually. And so where can you go?
Circling back to music, what would you do when you were watching the crowd? Because, of course, you always had all you guys always had the one earphone here because you guys didn't do 2 earphones. When the crowd wasn't reacting, what music would you do? Would you segue immediately out of what you were playing into something else?
If it was like an absolute catastrophe, in other words, you went from, to be honest, no DJ can say that's never happened to them. And
when people were not dancing, the crowd was not, you could feel it, but you would say to yourself, okay, am I gonna have the lighting guy fade out into darkness, or I'm just gonna play right through this?
Well, I'll tell you, that's a very good point. If the light man didn't instinctively know that if the floor was very quickly thinning, if they didn't take the lights down by at least 50% or more, and hiding that fact, because that's half the battle right there. A bright dance floor, if it's not crowded, it's like forget about it. It's bad with a capital B.
Yeah, because I remember being at Studio 54 one evening. I got there a little early and the DJ was playing and, the lights were up bright and no one was dancing. Right. And then finally, when the lighting technician came into the booth and then the DJ and him started playing, and I would always go up to the level where I'm not too far from the booth because I wanted to see what was going on with the technical side and down below. And then suddenly the DJ started, the lighting technician started bringing the lights down low and people started walking out.
I think that studios is and always will be the exception to every rule because, they could have all their lights on and people there, there's as much a thing about watching, people watching and watching everyone else dance and being up in the balcony and observing everything. That's about the only place I know where the lights you could have, because they had theatrical lighting. They had like stage lighting that would wash the dance floor. I mean, you could feel the heat when you were standing on the dance floor dancing. When they had some of these park cans, at full, you could actually feel the heat from the lights down on you. But again, they loved that theatricality there.
Well, that was what was different about Studio 54 because it was a full theater and they had the ride,
Yes,
the stage they rode back and forth, and all
right.
the backdrops and the spoon and the moon and all of that.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
I recently spoke to a couple of other guests. Don Blatton, he ended up working for Dick Clark. He now has the Wow Factor. He invented the slip pad.
Very
Don
interesting.
expressed in our interview that initially he was disappointed in the creation of 12-inch records
Mhm.
because he felt that they took away from the artistry of mixing 245. Did you
Ah,
prefer mixing 45s or 12-inch records?
I prefer mixing 12-inch records. First of all, the sound was like 100 times
Oh,
better.
yeah,
And
yeah.
in a big club where sound was so important at that volume, the difference, you really could hear the difference because I would occasionally go, at the Saint or at 12 West or something. I'd go back to some old 45s and sort of drop them in here and there. And at that level, with that kind of sophisticated sound system, you really would hear the differences in dynamics because and also at 12 West, we had an oscilloscope that you could actually see the dynamics visually of the sound that was being played on the floor. So you'd go from like it looked like a carnation on the display of a
Right.
really dynamic 12-inch record. And then you'd go to a 45 and it would be this tiny little, the tiny little line and a very anemic looking thing.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so there's the
Now,
difference. But of course, you have to bear in mind that most of the club gigs I did in New York were very long. They were anything from 6 to like 12, 18-hour shifts. And like the Saint, we'd go starting at midnight and we wouldn't stop until noon or beyond. So yeah, 45s, you're thinking 3 minutes, 4 minutes tops. Can you imagine how difficult it would be to try to, you just couldn't do it.
in an evening when you were getting ready to go to work,
Mhm.
say with a Palladium or Flamingo or 12 West or Studio 54 or the
Sure.
Island, how many crates of 12-inch records would you take with you that
Uh,
you were going to be
right.
satisfied with?
Right, exactly. Well, there were kind of two sets, and there was like the core set, and that's the set I would travel to do like studio or the Palladium or any of the clubs that would close at like 5 or 6 in the morning. And so Underground, we never mentioned Underground, which was another favorite
That
club
was
of
a
mine.
great club too.
That was
Yeah,
a
I
wonderful
had a
club.
blast there.
Yeah, and
The
speaking of line
Underground.
men, as we were Eric Erickson, who's no longer with us, but
No,
he
I
was
know
he was
another wonderful
wonderful.
genius.
Yeah, another angel up there.
Yes,
He
absolutely.
was terrific. But so I'd have instead of crates, Jensen Lewis, which a lot of DJs will recognize that name. They made a canvas tote bag, and it was located. It might still be there for all I know. It was at 17th and 7th, I believe, in Manhattan. Anyways, they make these canvas tote bags, and they were the perfect size, and they zipped up the top, so it was all sealed. And so instead of using crates, which in and of themselves are kind of heavy and unwieldy, I would take 4 of those canvas bags, and they'd be about the same equivalent of, say, a crate. So I'd say probably 75 discs per bag. So that would be 4 bags. If I was working the Saint, it would be usually 10 bags because, of course, the longer
Oh my
hours.
God. Now, when
Yeah.
you were leading up to when you were leading up to leaving, were the collection of records that you were taking when they were already picked out prior, and you heard, and you kind of worked on your set list and put them in every time they were different. You to a different club, you would put in what you needed,
Pretty
getting
much.
ready to it prior
Yeah,
to
pretty much
leaving.
exactly the way you're describing it. In other words, if you had a playlist on your computer, and I'd constantly be tweaking it, but instead of a playlist where you're just hitting delete or moving a file from one folder to another, I would use those bags of records, and I'd pick something out and say, okay, I'm never going to play this again. So that would be pulled out, and that
Oh
goes into
shit.
retirement.
How often did you repeat a song, or did you ever repeat a
Never.
song? Never,
Never. Nope.
never,
That
never.
was like a major no-no in the back in the golden age. There was just so much great music. You never needed to play. And I can say, I'm not dissing any DJs. I know that in smaller venues, when you have like 100, 200 people, You'd be playing like, maybe the top 5 records a couple times in the course of a night. There's nothing wrong with that, but just the type of clubs that I worked at were very sophisticated. They didn't want to hear things twice. They wanted the DJ to take you on a trip, go on a journey. And, songs, they had a special place, and you'd fit them all together and make this kind of tapestry of music. And it really was, like I said, there was so much great stuff you never had to repeat. I would go home, many nights and say, oh shit, I didn't play this, and this, and I really wanted to, have leftovers that I never even got to. And we're talking like 8, 12 hours, still not getting to everything you wanted to get to.
Exactly. Why do you think that disco music today has such a grip on popular culture today around the world?
One reason, I think, is quality. I mean, that's my one answer, my one word answer, quality. I think when they launched Studio 54 Radio on Sirius XM, which was about 10 years ago, there was this renewed interest in disco, and I think it finally came full cycle, and people were looking at it again and looking at it with a more critical ear than originally. And, with all the bad press and all the hoopla about, the disco sucks movement and the restoration of rock and roll as the American song, the American sound,
Right.
disco kind of got pushed away, pushed aside, except in the underground, where people were still dancing. But popular culture came back to disco about 10 years ago, and they really gave it another look and another listen. And I'm sorry, but like the quality of this stuff, granted there's ridiculous disco music that's absolutely asinine, but the bulk of it, the majority of it is fantastic stuff.
Oh my God.
Yeah, the musicians that participated in putting these things together, even though they were not as necessarily credited, they were all masters. I mean, these are guys and women that would play in symphony orchestras around the country, in Philadelphia, in New York City, as their main job, and they would do session work in the studio.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Right. A lot of the music that our ex-producer, the late Jacques Morale, thank you, Jacques.
Yes, hi, Jacques.
For creating such an amazing concept set to disco music. He always had strings and horn players, and it was like almost a full orchestra in the recording studio. And that impressed me a lot about him as a classical trained pianist.
Oh,
he
really?
always
Yes.
wanted only horn sections, violins. Everything had to be, live in the recording studio. Tell me about a quick memory from your disco era. What was the funniest or craziest thing that ever happened to you while you were playing?
Oh boy. Well, I can tell you, since we were talking about Studio a bit, Studio had these kind of famous confetti cannons that were mounted on the perimeter of the balcony. And so they would shoot them up into the air because, they had like 40, 50-foot ceilings. So they would shoot them straight up. And of course, everything was showered down. And I can remember specifically one night when they set them off, and I'd say about half a pound of confetti fell on the turntable, but
oh shit!
The one that was actually playing, and
right.
There was no, the needle was like going around, and I would have to like blow on the disc on the record to get the confetti out of the way, but not blow so hard as to hit blow the needle off the groove. So that was like one of those unforgettable memories.
You do realize I'm being a really good boy, because some of these words and this, like, and you being so dangerously handsome, I have to behave myself when because I Googled you and I found pictures of you in your early days looking like the model, so good looking, with a giant head of hair and a tiny bikini bathing suit, which, by the way, I think you can still get into. Here's a question. What would you do if you had a hot set going on and the record then begins to skip? How do you recover?
Oh, skip. I would pray that there was another record on the other side, because, you want to absolutely, positively, you don't want to get out gracefully, because it just can't be done. You just turn the volume up on whatever's on the other side, and that's it. If the crowd is with you, I mean, it's not a bunch of, pretentious queens. If the
No.
if the crowds love you, they'd probably cheer and say,
Well,
all
they
right,
do,
bro.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
just to let all our fans know and the listeners and viewers, you're on XM Radio.
Yes. Yes. In
Now,
fact,
are you on Friday nights?
I'm on Friday nights at 9 o'clock Eastern, and that's 6 o'clock Pacific. But in addition to that, I'm also making inroads. There's a new channel by Andy Cohen called the Kiki Lounge.
Yes, and I hear that you're on it.
I am on it. So
you're the DJ.
That's correct. I don't have the dates and times yet, but that will be another facet of my Sirius XM life.
He's on my bucket. He's on my bucket list.
He's on my crush list. He's on my crush list. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, I had you on my crush list. I had you on my crush list, but now we're buddies now, and I don't know, that might be too awkward.
Yeah, we've known each other too long. But, I just want to tell you, I remember like when Jacques, because Jacques used to come to the Pines so often. And I remember when he brought me the first Village People record. And what a thrill that was, and how excited. I'm thinking, oh my God, this is a gay group, although, it wasn't overtly gay as far as the buying public was concerned. But I mean, I felt so proud that Jacques had accomplished this, and I'm so proud of you've been with it like from day one. And so, my hat's off to you, man.
Thank you. I finished 40 solid years, and it didn't end the way I wanted it to. But then again, you can't have everything in life.
No, you can't. You never know when it's going to end. Yeah.
Exactly. It ended in a very bizarre way. And then, so to all of those members, I wish them well. I'm still very close with Randy Jones. You know this. Do you still DJ with vinyl, or are you DJing with digital mixes?
I use strictly digital. I prefer actually using CDs, because it's so close in my mind, that tactile feeling of like going through, instead of going through 12 inches like you do in a bin, you're going through albums, looking at discs. I never use a controller, and I don't use a laptop. I either use thumb drives or I use CDs.
I want to thank you for being on this show with me. You are one of the handful of DJs that I admire. In fact, January, I went up to see you. Was it 2020? My birthday party.
Yes, that's right.
You were playing at Scandals.
That's correct.
And I had a bunch of people that showed up. And that was a blast. I had a blast over there. I want to thank you for everything. Good luck with XM. Good luck with the Kiki Lounge, Robbie Leslie, legendary hero, DJ of my youth and growing up. Again, how can people find you on social media?
I'm on Instagram at, I think you'll have to just look for Robbie Leslie, ROBBIELESLIE. I can't remember exactly how it's worded, but it'll pop up. And and my website, of course, RobbieLeslie.com. And I'm on Facebook as well.
Yeah.
So reach out, you'll find me.
Well, Robbie, I want to thank you. I love you dearly. I love you dearly. Thank you so much for being part of Disco Chronicles. It's really important for me to chronicle this era and this time that we lived in. And who better than someone like me that lived it and also was part of it as one of the pioneers in music, with one of the most influential groups. But for me to actually now speak to all of my heroes, and then hearing how the things I didn't do, or the things I didn't experience because I was touring with the group, hearing it through you guys and your ears, hearing it through, what you're saying through my ears, is just wonderful. It's refreshing. And, I think that music has kept us going, and it will continue to do so.
Absolutely.
And so, my friend, good luck with everything. I love you. And thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Robbie Leslie, legendary DJ.